Yes, please. Maybe I will give an example of work later. So this is when I play the sound. From there. Hello, my name is Epa. I'm from Greece. Thank you very, very much. It's a great honor to be here. I was born in Athens and I'm mainly an electroacoustic music composer and a pianist. Finished my PhD at Manchester University with Professor David Berezan and Ricardo Clement. And during my PhD, my interest was composing electroacoustic music with aspects from Greek culture. Now, why I was interested in that was the fact that I believe that through electroacoustic music, we can actually transmit a wide range of cultural messages through the music itself. Some cultural messages that maybe would be more difficult to transmit through other music genre. And I also felt that during my PhD, during the composition of my works, which all had kind of their basis on Greek mythology and other Greek aspects of culture, I could create a lot of transformations, sound transformations, which also symbolized cultural transformations. And I feel that electroacoustic music somehow can constitute a bridge for different cultures to communicate. A very good example is an electroacoustic music composer called Robert Normando, who composed a piece called Chorus for the Victims of September 11th. So actually what he did after the terrorist attacks, he felt that, wow, why people should kind of must fight for religious reasons. And he actually created an electroacoustic piece called Chorus, and he used samples from three main religions, Christian and Islam, as well as Buddhism. And he incorporated the aspects of these religions, like the music of these religions, to his own composition. But he processed the sounds, so there are parts of this composition that actually you can hear sounds from different religions processed. But through the composition, it seemed so harmonious, so subtle, that you could feel his message, like how to unify all these aspects through the electroacoustic music. So generally, I have a lot of influence from this type of concept, like how to use electroacoustic music to either formulate intercultural bridges or transmit some positive unification messages. In general, I believe that because electroacoustic music is very much based on sound processing and sound transformation, it is much more flexible to formulate this type of connection with a lot of respect to different cultural, let's say, frameworks. Now, for this piece, during my master's at Sussex Uni, I remember composing music for a list of experimental films from American filmmaker called Stan Brakhage. Most of his films were silent, but this specific film called I Dreaming, it had music, but I was very much impressed by the way he depicted himself dreaming somehow. And I felt that, wow, how can I do this how can I represent the state of dreaming through music? That's why the title is I Dreaming, an electroacoustic exploration of reality and perception. And I'm going to explain now what I mean by reality and perception. This piece that you're going to hear at the concert in the evening, it consists of three different sections. The first section is actually purely electroacoustic. So all the sounds you hear on the first section of the piece are heavily processed sounds in a studio environment, mostly sounds of bells, different sorts of bells, but heavily processed. The second section of the work has some ambient sounds of violin and then piano as well. And so somehow the second section, we could call it more ambient than electroacoustic. It's a transformational section, which leads to the third part, where the sounds of a choir singing Byzantine-based music. Byzantine is a sort of Greek monophonic church music, which has inspired a lot of composers to create sections of Byzantine music that are not necessarily monophonic. But so the third section of the piece has a Byzantine-based choral section, which is actually not processed. And then the final section returns to the first one, which is like the heavily electroacoustic, the processed sounds of bells. So in a way, what I mean about perception is that within the context of the piece, the first section is the purely electroacoustic one, which is the reality one. And then we move to the second section, which is the ambient one, which is the transitional section. Moving to the third section, which is actually the status of dreaming, but the sounds in this section are original. It's the choir sound. Now, this is from the perception, from the viewpoint of the piece itself, but from the listener's point of view, actually, the perception is kind of opposite, because the first section, the electroacoustic one, are the heavily processed sounds. The second version is the ambient one, and the third one, which is the dream state, are actually the non-reality sounds, but in reality they are original sounds. So it's kind of inverted of what the piece is about. And I'm kind of very interested in how reality and dream and kind of non-reality can relate together through the piece, first of all, but also through the audience perception. So for those who are not familiar, electroacoustic music is a music for fixed media, and we use processed sounds, and it's only produced by loudspeakers. And this piece, 9-minute duration, I examine how electroacoustic music reflects specific cultural narratives, and also how these have an impact on society. And for example, how do these heavily processed sounds are perceived by an audience, and how does the audience understand this kind of transition from the electroacoustic part to the ambient part, and then from the ambient part to the real part. So electroacoustic music started on the mid-20th century, and it's a genre, of course, that combines electronic and also acoustic sounds. And in the very first years, mostly tapes were used for the sound processing. Now technology has provided us a lot of different software for that. Now, as I mentioned before, the piece you will listen in the concert is, of course, mainly electroacoustic, but it hybridizes different genres of music. And I strongly believe that by hybridizing electroacoustic music with other genres of music, it really challenges the creation of the potential creation of new genres, but also of new expressions of the culture. For example, it's a very different experience to listen to a choir singing live in a concert hall, but listening to a choir within an electroacoustic piece, which is mainly processed sounds, heavily processed sounds, and suddenly it somehow transforms to an acoustic piece, so an original voice recording section. I think it's a very different perception of the sound than if it's an original choir piece. And also how this section positions itself in the global, in the total piece is also something that for me it has a very deep meaning. So for this specific piece, the choral version represents a state of dreaming, and obviously, if somebody listens to this section without the electroacoustic piece, it can have a totally different message. And for each one, it's very subjective. So that's why I believe that each member of an audience can have a totally different approach to that, totally different input. And also, it's very important to talk a bit about the psychoacoustic insights. It's a Greek word, actually, psychoacoustiki, psyche, the soul, acoustic, listening. And it has to do with how people perceive a specific sequence of sounds and how also they experience the sound. So I believe that by blending different types of music, by hybridizing different types of music in a meaningful way, can help evolve, can help somebody, the listener, evolve his psychoacoustic insights in a very, in many different ways. Something else that I would like to talk about is also how to spatialize pieces. Electroacoustic music gives us the opportunity to perform a work in in a variety of sound installations. There are sound installations with more than 500 loudspeakers. A good example of a big sound installation is in Birmingham, Beast. Even if you have a stereo piece for 2 channels, you can diffuse it in real time in as many loudspeakers as the sound installation has, So obviously, by spatializing a piece in a sound installation can help a lot of different elements be perceived in various ways. In a way, sometimes when I listen to pieces in different sound installation, I feel as if I'm listening to the same piece, but it's actually not the same piece from the point of spatialization, because a lot of different elements can influence me depending on how the piece is performed. And also, in this case also, because the piece is combining many different types of music, it's also very interesting to experience this in different sound installations. And first of all, I would mention that the compositional style, I use the word innovative just from the point of view that I decided to blend 3 different types of music and then kind of blend them. And I'm very interested to see how this has an impact in a cultural level.
You mean have 1 more minute?
In a cultural level. Electroacoustic music in general gives us the opportunity to combine different types of music. There is also a term called musical quotations. Ambrose Field is a professor now he was a professor at York University when I was there. He's a distinguished English composer. I was very surprised that one of his electroacoustic music compositions incorporated sections of a Greek pop song. I got very surprised, and I asked him, what was his philosophy behind it, and he said that he wanted to give a kind of more place-specific notion through that. So again, it's how it interests me how you perceive a different kind of music within an electroacoustic piece. It can be very, very different. It can have totally different dynamics. But the piece I composed for this concert tonight, I would call it electroacoustic music combining ambient music and also original sounds. And the soundscapes you will listen as well in the evening. It incorporates recorded sounds of bells mostly, and also piano and ambient elements as well. And as you see in the last image, it has Byzantine influence. So it features a choir inspired by Byzantine traditions, in a way that the blending of historical and modern elements can be emphasized. Now, I would like to play for the last, we have 2 minutes more. I can play an excerpt of the piece just to give you an understanding, and then I'm open to some questions. Yeah, I can play maybe 1 minute of the piece. Thank you for that. Maybe the output, I have to change the output, right? So I go to sound. That's really Shango. So it's HDMI transmitter.
No.
Headphone. Yeah. So input is Pro Tools aggregate. Output I put the external headphones. Let's try again. So you heard the first part, which is the transition from. You heard the first part, which is the transition from the electroacoustic to the ambient. And in the evening, you'll hear the whole piece. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now answer another question section.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Well, thank you for coming to the platform to attend the JSSA meeting and concert. And I read your paper, and your paper mentions a lot of specialization. But this piece is stereo channel piece. Did you intend to compose it for amplis or multi-channels?
I didn't hear the very last part. Did I intend to compose for?
For multi-channel.
Well, actually, that thought came through my mind, but I believe that through the diffusion of piece to different sound installations of a stereo piece, it gives you the flexibility to challenge yourself to present the piece in various ways in spaces with many loudspeakers in a way that it can be perceived differently. So for that reason, I decided to compose it in stereo because it would give me the flexibility to experiment in diffusing this piece in any type of installation without any type of limitations. But actually, in the piece itself, it has material which is specialized, like in the stereo version, which can also be shown in the diffusion. But actually, that's a very good point for future compositions, how to examine this through multi-channel compositions, which have, of course, other kind of advantages, because you can have a very good control in where to position, elements in the piece. So yeah. Thank you. Very, very good question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well.